When I was putting together my review of Digimon World 1, I thought no one was going to watch it. I thought it would be a passion project I put together for myself, but would be a one and done, a fun little experiment, and that would be it. That's not exactly how it went. Since then, people have been excited to recommend new games for me to review in the Digimon vein, but when they weren't suggesting Next Order or Cyber Sleuth, the conversation usually went back to Digimon World 3. Right off the bat, I could tell that after this game, a lot of other titles in the franchise would take notes from it, at least in terms of presentation. But I've been curious to see if they did the same with its style of gameplay, since so many of these games are so different from each other. I mean, say what you will, but I actually like how varied the Digimon games are, and they offer so many new experiences, something I'm pleased to still see today as Digimon goes back to its roots or tries out new things like a visual novel strategy hybrid. But if this is the game that sets a standard for a while, I think it's worth exploring how and why. Now, in classic Digimon fashion, there's an extra element here to complicate things. We are looking at Digimon World 3 today, but with an asterisk. Digimon World 2 never made its way to Europe. I would imagine the messy release of the first title, both coming out so much later and also bringing so many bugs and issues with it that could even prevent you from completing the game, had something to do with that. And while I think there's some interesting elements to World 2, I can't help but wonder if the reception to that game kept it from getting localized. Europe did get Digimon World 3, however, but it was still a little late to the party. In 2002, we saw the game release in the States first, and then in Japan, and then much later in the tail end of that year, it came to Europe. It contained some features that were in the Japanese release, but not in the American, including some updates to the game's mechanics and post-game content. And in a sort of Final Fantasy fashion, came with a different title to compensate for the missing release. I wanted to tackle what's widely agreed to be the most complete version of this game. It came with its own set of challenges, which we'll get into, but I wasn't about to take the easy way out for what just might be the most requested and most highly anticipated video I've ever made. A huge thanks to everybody that's been waiting. This is Digimon World 2003. This game doesn't have the most complicated box art, but I do think it's a bit nicer than what we had for World 2, showing off some favorites with Agumon and Guilmon, but also Bearmon. The first two are easily recognizable from Digimon Adventure and Tamers, but a lot of kids in America and Europe probably didn't know Bearmon, as up to that point, he was only shown off in a Japan-exclusive OVA the previous year called Island of the Lost Digimon. This was connected to the Digimon Frontier series and did get an English dub and release, but not until 2005, a few years after this game launched. Obviously, kids not already being familiar with all the Digimon here is in no way a bad thing. I think the mix of characters represented here varying in recognizability may have helped, kind of saying you'd see both familiar and new stuff here, plus Bearmon has a great little design, he's so precious. I like the Japanese box art too, but I'm not sure how I feel about War Greymon and Gallantmon just sort of being slapped into the sky background. Not the worst looking, but if the focus of the art here was just the rookie Digimon, I think this case would have easily been my favorite. I was lucky enough to get all three of these after buying the American release for myself, my friend Josh getting me the Japanese version, and my old bud Channel Pup helping me secure the European release. No manual in this one sadly, but at least the cover art is there. Listen, I don't know what to tell you, I'm a picky collector. Once again, I am not using emulation for this review. As a matter of fact, I'm not even relying on the use of my PS3 for this one. I'm playing this game entirely on an original PS1 system, or I guess more specifically, the later slimmer model. I had some unique struggles getting the footage captured for this one, which I'll explain in further detail later. But if you notice some of the early footage I use being a little dark or this irritating red line going down the screen, I did address those issues before getting too deep into the recording process, so it won't look like that the entire time. When the game begins, we're treated with an incredibly well animated CGI cutscene, which I guess has become something of a staple for these games now. Makes it more of a shame that Rumble Arena 2 didn't get one, but I guess that was when these games are moving on into a new era. Everything here is rendered so well. The characters are lively and expressive, and a lot of what's going on here is actually relevant to the events of the game. Except for Bearmon. You can get one in the game, but I don't think you ever run into one, or at least there's never one with any importance. He's just here because you sort of expect to see him fighting Gallantmon. It's also probably fitting that we see a trio of Digimon here. Just like in Digimon World 2, our team will typically consist of 3 core members at a time, but there are some differences in the way it's handled here. These early intros are something I've always enjoyed, and I think they're worth talking about because not only is it the first thing a player is going to see when booting up the game, it's something that will help set the tone, nature, and energy of the experience they can expect. And I especially like that this one in particular can kind of hit the player differently the further they get into the game and they start to recognize what's being represented. I think it's a really strong way to get the player invested before the title screen even shows up. Speaking of setting the energy, that's something I need a lot of when working on a video this big. Thankfully, when I'm sitting down for a recording session, working on the script, or editing, I get a little help from our partners over at G Fuel. G Fuel is an energy drink provider that specializes in creating energy drinks for people like you and me in the gaming community, fashioning their flavors after tons of recognizable characters and titles like Sonic the Hedgehog, Elden Ring, and Hatsune Miku. I've been assured that Miku is a digital little creature and therefore counts as a Digimon. They have some original flavors as well, like my personal favorite, Miami Nights, which has a great pina colada taste and this cool synthwave inspired art on the tub. Look, they even made a little glow-in-the-dark version. What's even better, their formulas are crafted with the vitamins and caffeine you need to get energized, but are sugar-free, so you don't have to worry about the added crashes or jitters that you get from other energy drinks. If you would like to try some of their great flavors, you can use my code Wayneisboss on their website to get 20% off your online order. You get great energy drinks, and you help me out too. Everybody's a winner. Thank you so much to G Fuel for helping support the channel, and thank you for listening. And so now, back to the video. Okay, before we lose too much focus, we should try to lay down the groundwork, so let's get this game started. Okay, I gotta get this out of the way now because this is such a generic observation to make, but I was sort of reminded of Persona 3 with the way the transition screen is designed. The use of blue is nice, and we also see our first location, which is our first in-game depiction of the real world. Okay, everything that happens here is out of the player's control, but this is the most time and attention that's been paid to the real world in any of these games, and the relevance it plays to the main game will become more and more clear later, and I like the twist on Tokyo here with some slight sci-fi futuristic elements. Gives it a little personality. We're introduced to our main character, here named Junior, as he's waiting on a city block for his friends Teddy and Ivy. The overhead TV displays a news broadcast declaring the authorities have recently arrested members of a group known as the AOA, a criminal organization that's been up to vague internet terrorism. Something manipulating Digimon to their will, that sort of thing. Not sure what that's supposed to imply, or why we needed to specify that they're stationed in Europe, but I'm not the one writing the game, I guess. I do have a few guesses as to the members, though. Obviously, one way or the other, we know it's going to be important later, so they haven't been resolved as a problem yet since we just got here. Well, Teddy and Ivy finally show up, and it turns out Digimon are already pretty well known in this world, and the kids are all interested in this game known as Digimon Online. The group travels to the Megami Online Center to essentially be sent into the game itself.
How many of you have seen Tron?
Now, how exactly this works is a little confusing to me. At first, they make it sound like your physical body is in the real world, but your thoughts and ideas are turned into data and sent into the digital one. But as the game goes on, it really feels like your entire being is digitized and sent in, and honestly, I feel like that's just an overall simpler explanation, and it makes it less weird that certain things like the state of the player's physical bodies aren't brought up while they're in the game itself. And besides, it's not like the idea of kids being fully thrown into the digital world is a foreign concept for this franchise. I do really like this concept in principle though. I'm not sure if the digital world as it's depicted here was actually created by Megami or like discovered and repurposed to form this MMO, but I personally like to think it's the latter. It's a little hard to read too deep into a lot of the details here because these early PS1 games have never had the cleanest translations to English, and a lot of this stuff feels inferred rather than fully spelled out. It could also just be me muddling up the details from thousands of words that I've read over the course of a lot of hours playing this game, so if anyone has a more concrete explanation as to how this works, I'm all ears in the comments. Gonna be honest though, I really don't think it has that big of an effect on how things actually play out in the game. When the trio arrives at Megami to log into Digimon Online, they're faced with a few things that they'll need to do to get set up. First, creating an online name. See, at this point, I was very happy to see this because it already felt like we were getting a bit disconnected from our player character. It's the first time an MC has had a canon name that we can't change, and we spent a pretty good amount of time here just chatting with a lot of dialogue with no real input from the player. We do also see Junior's competitive personality on full display as he and Ivy kind of butt heads, which does kind of remove the element of the main character being a direct avatar for you, the player, but I've never minded that in and of itself. I'd always rather see the effort put into making the character you play as have a sense of place in the world that you're traveling through. We do at least get to choose our own online name, which I think is a smart way to implement the player agency and makes total sense when your characters are signing up to play an online game. I also really love this music, which is good because we're gonna be hearing this particular track a lot as it plays over the save screen, which takes a really long time to do its thing, but at least the tunes are pleasant. You also need to choose a Digimon pack. This will be the set of 3 rookie Digimon that you begin the game with 3 packs available to you. The Balance pack will start you off with a Patamon, Renamon, and Kotemon, the Powerful pack with Renamon, Monmon, and Agumon, and the Maniac pack, the one I chose, will see you beginning your journey with Guilmon, Patamon, and Kumamon. Bearmon. Okay, I should probably go ahead and address this now. There are a lot of Digimon that have different names depending on how they were localized. So like Tailmon is Gatomon in the States, or Mugandramon is Machinedramon. And I've never really been much of a stickler for certain names. Something I actually appreciate about the Digimon community is that everyone uses their preferred localized names for these creatures, but they don't treat it like a competition. Like I've never had anyone give me grief over calling Omegamon Omnimon, or Dukemon Gallantmon. And I appreciate that, they're just the names I'm used to. This little guy is a special case though, because in Digimon World 3 and 2003, he's known as Kumamon, but only in this game. You see, in Japan, this guy has always been Bearmon, but I guess the localization team wanted to use the Japanese word for bear, which is Kuma in his name, to make it less on the nose when spoken in English, I guess. I don't know, whatever. Outside of this one PS1 game, the name Kumamon actually belongs to this little guy, and from what I can tell, he existed at the same time as Bearmon, and I don't think that this name swap has existed anywhere in the franchise outside of this one PS1 title. So that is why I will be referring to this guy as something other than what you see on screen. Just thought that was a fun little piece of trivia. Okay, let's get back to it. So what is the purpose of choosing between these Digimon packs outside of just wanting your favorite rookie Digimon following you around? That actually is the main motivation for your choice here, because as we dig deeper into the game's mechanics, you'll see just how much the stats and unlockable forms for these creatures are totally in your control, but the intention here, as long as you're not obsessing over the meta aspects of the game, is to offer an early game balance based on your preference. Each of these rookies have different base stats that will grow with certain priorities in their attributes. Bearmon is a strong fighter with plenty of attack power, and Patamon is more like your mage with heavy emphasis on magic points for using techs and learning healing abilities faster. This is a good way of sort of controlling your early experience in the game and does have an effect over available Digivolutions, but that's gonna be its own little section of discussion. We'll get there. Intentions aside, I would really just recommend choosing whichever pack has a Digimon you like the most. I really wanted Guilmon, but Bearmon also sort of wound up being my MVP for this playthrough, so the Maniac pack worked out just fine for me. And don't stress out too much about missing out on any of these particular partners, because you can actually recruit them into your team later if you would like. Yeah, gonna need everyone to jot that one down, because recruiting will come up again, and it just might be more important than you think.
Let's get scratching.
Once our starting team has been chosen, just be on guard for this loud, awful noise that plays. It's so jarring and caught me totally off guard the first time I played. But now we're ready to roll, being transported into the game with a very Our War Game-esque sequence of our digital self trying to access the game, and once we're here, Oh man, this song is great too. And we have analog control, thank you. Oh, it feels so nice to be able to move around normally. After taking a little time to chat with the residents of the opening area, we're introduced to our partner Digimon, and this is the only time we will get to see them actually speak. Our friends meet up with us, and we see they've also chosen new online names. Ivy has chosen the name Kale, heavily insisting on only that name being used, which Junior decides to quickly be really rude about for some reason, and Teddy chooses the name Teddy. Godspeed, Teddy. And then we establish our own main mission in the game to pursue, splitting off from the group to go find the leaders of the various cities, beat them in battle to obtain their badges, and work our way up to the strongest tamer in Digimon Online to become the game's new champion. I've made it this far in these videos without making the direct comparison, and I still don't want to, but man, where have I heard that one before? We'll accomplish this by traveling across the domain, overcoming various obstacles in our path between each location for the chance to challenge each leader, but along the way, we start uncovering the details of a sinister plot. But let's slow down for a second. On the outset, we don't get to do a whole lot of exploring before being shuffled into a battle tutorial, but it's probably a good idea to get the basics of the battle mechanics down now. All of the battle mechanics, that sort of thing, that's probably better saved for its own section, but I do have to point out that the victory battle theme is the same one from Digimon World 2, but it's preceded by a jingle derived from the main battle theme of Digimon World 1. That is so cute. I love that. There actually isn't going to be much connecting this game to the first two in terms of continuity. I don't even think they're in the same version of the digital world, but the little references and connections like this are great. Now we're free to explore the city and get acquainted with some important stuff we'll be interacting with. One of the obvious and most important is the inns, where Gatomon will let us rest for a small fee so our Digimon can replenish all of its HP and MP. And these places will usually have a Guardramon that will let us save the game. Also, just gonna pop in here real quick and say hi to Terriermon. I'm pretty sure this is the only one in the game. In the next building over, we see two different types of shops. Gargomon will run the armory shops across the game, where, yes, in a more typical RPG fashion than we might be used to up to this point, we can equip each of our Digimon with armor, accessory, and weapons. Now, these weapons don't actually show up on character models, it's really just to boost your rookie's base stats. Like, can you just imagine how weird it would be to see a Digimon with like claws and fangs, like built-in attack power, running around with equipment like a sword or an axe or something? Nope, not yet. We'll get there. This equipment can be incredibly helpful for beefing up attack power, defense, and there are various other stats that can benefit from what your Digimon is wearing as well. The only thing is, it's expensive. You're gonna need to go out and do a bit of battling to get the bits that you'll need to buy this stuff. We also have a more standard item shop run by none other than Wizardmon, which is pretty wizard, as the kids would say. This will be stuff like healing items or discs you can use to help your Digimon recover from certain status effects like sleep, confusion, poison, that kind of thing. Making good use of spots like this will obviously be really important throughout the game, and the populated cities that we visit in Digimon Online will typically host these kinds of locations for recovery and replenishment. We can also poke our heads into this bar here called the Lamb Chop. This is established as a place where a lot of people visit. It's really not. You can count on one hand the amount of people that will actually show up here, and not many of them actually serve any importance. This is really just a way of conveying that exploring multiple locations and talking to as many NPCs as you can is a big part of this game, and it will be downright essential for progression in some parts. One of the other early places we can visit is this shop right here, where we're introduced to the card game. All right, let's just go ahead and get this one out of the way. A little bit ago, I reviewed the title Digimon Digital Card Battle, and in that video, I said things like tabletop games, trading cards, outside of just like collecting them. It's just not my thing, but I had a surprisingly good time playing that game, and I think the reason I was so surprised is because I was expecting the gameplay to be more like what you find in the card game of Digimon World 3. Yeah, not a fan of this, and I'm gonna be really honest with you, this is the one element of the game I felt a little unsure of covering because frankly, I don't have a ton to say about it. I tried it out in the beginning, tried to get down the basics, and then sort of forgot about it for most of the game. The way it works is sort of similar to Card Battle, where you'll be given some cards to start with at the beginning. When the match begins, you choose between two face-down cards. If you pull Kulumon, you get to go first, which honestly feels like it has little to no effect on the match at all. Next, you'll draw some cards from your deck, and if you have any program cards in your hand, you can use them to activate their supporting effect, like summon in a type of Digimon card, add defense or attack power to a certain card in a group, or of cards under a specific type, or screw around with your opponent's cards. Then you place your Digimon cards on the field. You'll have a certain amount of S energy for each color type of card, and the stronger a card is, the more S energy it will require to use, so you can't just load up on anything in your hand if you don't have the S energy needed to summon it. The S energy you have depends on how many cards of that color type you have in your deck. So if you focus and specialize on a certain card color, you'll have an easier time actually summoning what you have available. Once you summon your available Digimon cards from your hand, you can enter the phase where you load up program cards again. I think the type of program card that you can use dictates which of the two phases let you use said card. Either way, it all boils down to the numbers your cards add up to at the end, HP and AP. Every Digimon card has a base number of health points and attack points, and the program cards you use can increase the stats for both. You're essentially pitting the totals of these numbers against each other. You want to have enough AP to exceed their HP and your HP to exceed their AP. Best out of 3 rounds wins the game, and if you're the winner, you get a booster pack. See, that's the thing that sets this all apart from Digital Card Battle. You can go visit Divermon in cities and buy single cards directly from him, but it's one at a time and they're usually really expensive, so your best bet is to win booster packs in card battles or win them by finding Cardmon out in the overworld and beating them.
Let's get scratching.
Cardmon can be found by fishing, which is something that you can do after completing a fetch quest for an old geezer to collect a bunch of items to form a fishing rod, or kicking the various trees scattered around in the world. For that though, you'll need kicking boots, and this is where the game starts to show off how it handles side quests. We talked to this guy over here who tells us he can tell us how to get the kicking boots, but we first have to go find his missing Gabumon card, and oh boy, finding this thing sure is stupid. How in the world were you supposed to know it was just hiding in this bookshelf back in the city's inn? Well, by using a guide, that's how. You give him the card, he tells you about this Veemon that will give you the boots, and he's hanging out somewhere in the overworld. This is one of the first uses of Lamb Chop, gathering info about where this Veemon is, tracking him down all the way near the second city, playing hide and seek with him, and finally getting those damn boots. Yep, I will get into it later, but this game can get very errand heavy. It also benefits from using a guide, at least in places. Now you have the kicking boots, but it's not as easy as just running up to any tree and kicking it to get a Cardmon. You have to use this radar that will basically play Minesweeper with you to narrow down which tree actually has a Cardmon to fight, which ones won't do anything, and which ones will send out a different Digimon to attack you. Or you can just run up to a random tree and accidentally get right into the scuff with one of these little guys. I seriously recommend just fishing instead. It's faster, easier, and more reliable. Just find a body of water, drop down a line, and try to stop this meter in the right spot to either miss, pull up an aquatic Digimon, or land on a yellow one to fight a Cardmon. Okay, here's a cute little detail. In the 2003 version, when you successfully land on the Cardmon spot, this little chime will play so you know that you've got a cute little TCG demon before the fight starts. That sound is just not in the American version. I don't know, that's a strange difference. Like the random encounters that you fight in the overworld, these Cardmon will be more difficult depending on what locations you fish them up in. But as long as you can defeat them before they flee, you'll be gifted with a booster pack. Obviously, the quality of the packs, or rather the strength of the cards that you get out of them, will be determined by their category. And you'll get stronger booster packs from tougher card battle opponents or higher level Cardmon, which will toughen up as the game goes on. And this is an element that I see some appeal to, because that's part of the TCG scene that I really do enjoy. Getting a new booster pack to crack open, seeing what new cards you get to add to your collection, getting a whiff of that new card smell. But that feeling is a little diminished by the weird choice to make booster packs impossible to open by yourself. I mean, I guess it gives them something to do, but what's so hard about doing it yourself? Arbitrary importance, that is all you have, and how does that make you feel? Okay, actually, that was incredibly mean and rude. I'm sorry. So, why don't I actually care about this? Well, two main reasons. First of all, the tutorial is sort of terrible. The way it's dished out is just a giant wall of muddled text from an NPC, a far cry from the hands-on experience of learning how to play in digital card battle, and to make matters worse, the first battles you participate in here, while I think we're supposed to just act as silent tutorials after you listen to this guy jabber, are incredibly brain dead, giving me the wrong impression that there would be nothing complex about how this would work. Get cards with big numbers win, that was my takeaway here. Of course, later on in the game, program cards play a much larger role in all of this, especially for opponents that take advantage of specializing in certain color types that might seem weak at first, but with the right program cards can boost their Digimon cards to insane degrees. But by the time I saw that sort of thing, I just hadn't really been participating in card battles. I didn't see the progression of the system, and that is my own fault, yes, but the weak impression that the system left on me in the start just made the whole thing fade into the back of my mind while I was busy playing the rest of the game. All that aside, the second reason I don't really care about the card battles is they have no consequence. The entire trading card game mechanic is entirely optional, with even antagonistic characters later in the game challenging you to card battles, but if you lose, it's just back to the overworld and nothing comes from it. There's an entire area dedicated to the TCG. There's plenty of card battles to be had, and some of the post-game content revolves around collecting legendary cards and taking on a tournament of opponents, but I had checked out of this pretty early. Once I got close to the end, I saw how out of my league I was, and at that point, because this was its own separated world essentially, I saw no reason to get invested in the Twilight Hour. I would much sooner recommend the full game dedicated to this kind of playstyle instead, even if I find opening booster packs can be pretty fun on its own. Okay, so that whole topic kind of dodged around a few other things in the game that revolve around it, but I did want to just address the mechanic in full as much as possible, as early on as possible, and just like when I was playing the game, focus more on the parts of the title that I found more interesting and could talk more about. Though I did have more to say about the card game than I thought I would. That being said, there is one little mechanic that is attached to the card game that plays around with other parts of the title in some really interesting ways. As you embark on your journey properly, you're going to start getting acquainted with the way battles work pretty quickly. You might be walking around for a little bit and get jump scared by a random encounter, you might be fishing and catch something that isn't a cardmon, or you could talk to an NPC who wants to challenge you and a fight is initiated. Okay, that actually kind of depends. You see, there's this stat that your Digimon has that can change the way characters interact with you out in the overworld, that being charisma. Now this Gabumon right here would have every NPC in the game bowing at your feet. They probably just kept him out so you wouldn't get overpowered. Charisma changes based on equipment and leveling up, but the effect is how people will act when you talk to them. Most NPCs will have an initial piece of dialogue, like a little tidbit about the world, this old couple that wants to become Digimon, what they like to do when they log into the game, or this one lady who just completely unprompted feels the need to establish that she's not into younger guys. Which, I guess this game doesn't give me Persona vibes after all. There's even an establishment that will only let you win when your Digimon are cool enough, but what they really mean is that your collective charisma has to be high enough. This is worth going for though, because it grants you access to the main city's black market where you can purchase more powerful items and gear, and also opens the way to an auction house where, at certain points in the game, you can enter to bid on powerful items made exclusively for certain partner Digimon. Having high charisma also changes how these NPCs will respond to you once you try to speak to them past their initial dialogue. With lower charisma, they'll challenge you to a card battle. I'm not sure what this game is trying to say about the social status of TCG players, but let's just try not to read too deep into that. Get your charisma high enough though, and they'll challenge you to a Digimon battle instead, opening up the floodgates to a whole new level of mechanics and numbers to dig into. Just like in Digimon World 2, battles are portrayed with 3D models in a fairly traditional turn-based combat system. Only here, while you do have a party of 3 Digimon, these fights are one-on-one. At least in the sense that only one Digimon from each opponent is active at a time. You can sort your party, with whatever rookie is on top being the one that will start the battle. The fight command will have your Digimon dish out an attack with physical damage, basically their base move. Technique will let you use any text that your Digimon has learned. Tag will let you swap your active Digimon to another one. You can use an item, or you can choose Run to try fleeing from the confrontation, but you won't get any experience or bits that way. Techs can range from a variety of different things, with support stats like buffing your attack, defense, or speed, to inflicting status ailments on opponents, or use an attack based on an elemental weakness or boosted physical damage. There are also healing techs, but these are a little weird because you can't use them on any Digimon that are currently active. So if your Digimon takes a heavy bit of damage and you tag a healer like Patamon's healing tech will just heal himself and not anyone else, so it kind of defeats the purpose of having a healer class member on your team. What you'll really want to do is stock up on healing items because they'll probably be just as effective as a healing tech and not require learning a specific move. That's not even mentioning your revive item. It seems to be the only recovery item that actually affects your other Digimon that aren't currently in active combat. So say if you're in a fight where 2 of your 3 Digimon get knocked out, your active Digimon can use a life disc to revive them both at once and also bring them back to full health. Not MP though, that's something that you need to rely on the ins for, because you're not gonna find much here in the way of MP recovery items, which I find an odd choice. But the ins aren't that far spread from each other, so it's not the end of the world or anything, but having items that you could spend your bits on to recover this sort of stuff wouldn't have been either. Like, if you're trying to balance it, just make those items more expensive. I don't know what the deal is here. And as you'd expect, techs can also inflict status effects like poison and confusion, which are pretty effective. Confusion caught me off guard the first time I got hit by it though, because the music is replaced by this crazy little jingle and your moves are all replaced with other words, and you essentially have to choose between them and happen to choose that one that will randomly be selected to actually result in attacking. Using items here can be tricky, which is kind of funny because there is an item that cures confusion, but that effect is only granted to the Digimon using the item, so do you see the problem here? Now, the effectiveness of your attacks is going to depend on the specific strengths of your Digimon and the weaknesses of the other on the defense. Each Digimon will have a pretty full list of stats to keep track of their attributes. Strength is pretty obvious, but only determines the power of physical attacks. Defense determines dexterity against the same. Spirit determines how strong your Digimon's magic attacks will be, and if you use a lot of text, this is definitely something to upgrade. Wisdom, on the other hand, will determine how accurate your Digimon's hit rate will be with magic, as well as how likely they are to dodge magic. On top of that, you also have various stats based on each element in the game, those being fire, water, ice, wind, thunder, machine, and dark. Boosting these stats will increase the tolerance you have to these elements. Various Digimon will have specific strengths in these areas, usually in the form of text that use said element in an attack. Now, you might be wondering if boosting these stats will also increase the effectiveness of your text revolving around these elements. Man, you tell me. Best answer I can come up with is no, not really, or at least not that I can tell. I think magic strength is pretty much all handled by the spirit stat. The other specialties are just for defense, really. Obviously, by winning battles and earning experience, these stats will naturally go up bit by bit. Every time you level up, you see a little boost in these numbers and your proficiency in each area will increase. Different rookie Digimon will have natural focuses on certain stats, but there is actually a way to grant controlled growth to certain stats for each Digimon. Near the bottom of the screen, you may have noticed something called TP, and no, it's not what you do to your friend's house while they're on vacation. These are training points. Each time your rookie Digimon levels up, they'll receive 5 TP that can be used at a local gym for specialized training. These gyms will be stationed around the world of Digimon Online, run by powerful Digimon, and let you choose specific stats to hone in on and boost. You can also control the extent of the training, using different levels of TP to determine the extent and proficiency of that training. You can choose between 1 TP, 5 TP, and 10 TP to spend at once, resulting in a lower or greater level of growth for the category you've chosen. There is still a bit of a chance factor here, as your Digimon will run through a series of trials they can either succeed in or fail, but they always have a certain number of tries for each stat, and if they continuously succeed in training, the amount that stat will increase can be way higher. I also love these animations. It's such a great little V-Pet aesthetic, and each rookie Digimon has dedicated animations for every single type of training. It's one of the benefits to making the Digivolution process center around a select set of ever-present rookies at the center. Yep, I have not forgotten. We'll talk about the Digivolution soon. Now, the types of training available won't be the same at every gym. The gyms you can access in the early game will largely focus on the base stats like attack, defense, speed, and stuff like that. But later on, heftier gyms will grant you access to training the elemental resistance stats as well, where successful training yields even greater rewards. It's worth it to check out the various gyms to see which ones will grant the widest range of stats to enhance, as there are benefits outside of battles that these numbers can grant you, which again we will get into soon. You can also obtain an item called the Training Book from Brown Numamon in a later area of the game to heighten your Digimon success rate during training, and can also earn tickets that will allow you to access different types of training, including super training, at any gym in the game, which is greatly helpful if you find yourself tied to an area with an earlier gym. There is one stat that every Digimon has that I haven't really addressed yet, but that's because I wanted to emphasize it here. Speed. Please train your Digimon's speed. Speed is one of the most crucial stats you can increase, especially in the early game. Your first instinct will be to assume that this increases your Digimon's place in the battle's attack order. The one with the higher speed will get to take their turn first, but it actually goes a step further than that. Increase your speed high enough and overshadow that of your opponent, and you'll find that you can start taking your turn twice in a row, letting you attack twice or heal before attacking without being interrupted. This is already super helpful, but there's still one more reason to focus on this, because your Digimon's speed also controls their blocking rate and physical attack accuracy. I found this out the hard way in a battle with an important enemy that kept temporarily increasing his speed to the point that he was blocking every single attack I threw at him until his stats returned to normal. Get your speed high enough and you can not only stack your turns, though I do think 2 is the limit, but you can also ensure your attacks will hit more frequently and that your Digimon can block physical attacks way more often too. That's the fun part of RPGs like this, isn't it? Finding those little mechanics that you can bend to your will and manipulate, giving you the upper hand in fights, tackling the system before breaking it, controlling it. Wanna know how else to break this game? Accessories can make a huge difference in this title. The training book is a good example, but there's a bunch of other ways that you can use accessories to your advantage to even the playing field during battles. You can equip 2 accessories per Digimon at a time, but you can't stack multiple of the same item or 2 items that have the same effect. You can use rings that will boost your resistance to certain elements, or items that add an elemental effect to your physical attacks, and those accessories have an even stronger version that you can obtain later. So you've got an enemy that dishes out strong machine attacks. Equip a machine ring to boost your defense, and a bolt power to make your Digimon more effective in a battle against them. But beyond all of these accessories, there's one that's more well known than the rest, and in one version of the game, I would argue is sort of infamous. Near a desert area of the game, you can find some Tuskmon out in the wild. At this point, my Guilmon could digivolve into War Growlmon and had learned the tech Picking Claw, which has a certain chance of stealing a drop item from an enemy, which is handy for grabbing stuff from certain wild Digimon that have an otherwise rare drop rate for said item. What exactly do you pilfer from these guys? A little something known as a counter crest. Take a little time to grind through these Tuskmon until you can snag 3 counter crests so you can equip them on all 3 of your Digimon in your party, because this will give your Digimon a certain chance to counter physical attacks from your enemies. I don't exactly get what attributes the strength of a counter is tied to, but I've been up against the wall with some really strong opponents who took minimal damage from my Digimon, whether the attacks were physical damage or magic, but as long as they toughed out an attack and countered it, it could sometimes take out the rest of the enemy's health in a single blow. How does this work? Beats me, but you should totally use it. It's just far too useful not to. And here's one of the craziest differences between Digimon World 3 and 2003. See, in 2003, and I believe in the Japanese version, the counter crest gives you a possibility, a likelihood of snapping back against physical attacks with a counter. I don't know the exact number myself, but I've read somewhere that there's a 25% chance of triggering a counterattack, which sounds about right. In the American release of the game, the counterattack rate is a 100% chance. It takes what would otherwise be a pretty useful item and turns it into an entirely broken mechanic. With all of this equipment and training in mind, what you end up with is honestly a pretty easy combat system. Okay, that is as long as you're paying attention to the items available to you and setting your Digimon up for success. Without all of that, you're gonna have a tougher time, but it's really not too hard to make sure your Digimon is ready for most challenges. You can typically balance them out to be resistant to the right effects, be strong with the others, be fast, and be able to counter. There's even field items that you can drop to strengthen certain elements in a fight, but I never used them because I never needed to. Now, there are some other type advantages to keep in mind that sort of exist outside of these stats. Like, fire-based Digimon will be inherently strong against plant-based ones. Wind Digimon strong against bug, but there are some that seem less obvious. Like, sure, I guess I see the logic in water being strong over machine, but ice Digimon having a natural boost over Dino Digimon is a little less so, and dark Digimon having a natural advantage over dragon Digimon is just something you would have to tell me for me to know it at all. But it's not enough to just focus on training the stats of a rookie Digimon and sending them out into battle. You can bump up their numbers, harden their edges, and give them equipment, but that by itself won't really be efficient, and it would be ignoring one of the staple elements of the Digimon franchise. With that said, it's finally time to start talking about Digivolution. So far, we've seen the use of two very different Digivolution systems in the Digimon World games. Both have shared a common link in that the base form of a creature may hold much more potential than you would initially expect, granted that you're willing to learn how to best build them up into new forms. Branching paths based on the manipulation of nature and nurture, adding specifically trained or focused elements of a foundation to see what new forms can spring from it. In Digimon World 3, your rookie Digimon will always be around. They follow and train with you, they learn and grow stronger from battles, and the more they rise in levels, the more branches of evolution start to open up to them. Let's take Veemon for example. For a while, this is the only form that you'll see from him, but once he reaches level 5, he unlocks the ability to digivolve into X-Veemon, Pale Dramon once he reaches level 20, and Imperial Dramon Dragon Mode once he reaches level 40. Now, I don't mean that when X-Veemon reaches level 20, he can digivolve into Pale Dramon. No, I mean when Veemon reaches level 20, he unlocks the Digivolution. As X-Veemon levels up, and yes, he has his own separate levels that grow alongside Veemon, he will get access to other Digivolutions that spring off from him. Okay, so the standard experience that your Digimon receives at the end of a battle goes to your rookie Digimon and only the rookie. As you unlock Digivolutions, you can essentially equip them to use in battles, but you can only have 3 slots open for each rookie. You can manually digivolve from your rookie to one of your slotted Digivolutions once the battle begins, but it's way easier to go into your rookie status screen and choose one of the Digivolutions to automatically load up when the battle begins, so you're not wasting a turn with every fight. And when you need to tag to a different Digimon while in battle, you can also choose which of their Digivolutions they'll swap in with for more convenience. It's pretty well thought out. Now, if you have a Digivolution equipped during a fight, your rookie will receive their normal experience, and the Digivolution you used will receive DV EXP or Digivolution experience. How much experience your rookie needs in order to level up will depend on their level, which is normal. So Agumon will need to gain around 85 experience to level up from level 5 to level 6, but will need to gain an additional 118 experience after that to reach level 7. But Greymon would need 10 DV experience to level up every time. Like, he'll just need 10 DV experience for every single level until it reaches a high threshold, like level 95 or something. So this means while your rookie is taking a pretty widespread amount of battles to jump from just a couple of levels, the Digivolution they're utilizing in those same battles is leveling up almost every single victory screen. The balance made here actually comes from the Digimon they're defeating. Every wild Digimon has a certain amount of DV experience they grant when defeated, but they actually gradually reward less and less of it the more powerful your rookie's level is, so the higher level your rookie, they'll receive the same amount of experience from a certain wild Digimon on repeated victories, but receive less DV experience for whatever Digivolution you're training at the time. That might sound like it could get pretty punishing, but it's really not in the grand scheme of things. As you make your way through the game, you'll encounter more powerful Digimon that grant more standard experience and require your rookie to be at a higher level before they begin yielding less DV experience. experience. Okay, that's a lot of words. That might sound complicated, but what it really means is that there's not a ton to track for what you'll need in order to level up your Digivolution's level. At the very worst, the maximum required battles it would take to level up your Digivolution it would be 10. But that's if you're fighting the weakest of the weak wild Digimon that wouldn't even be giving off enough standard experience to benefit your rookie. Now, tracking how much standard experience your rookie needs in order to level up, it doesn't tell you. There's no indicator for like how much standard experience your rookie needs to get to the next level, which gets really annoying, and I have tried to find charts. A lot of them are kind of all over the place. Some are accurate, some are, it's weird. What you will need to track is the branching paths of Digivolutions for each rookie. There's a lot of guides and charts laying this stuff out, and I'll link to some helpful ones in the description. It's one of those things where when it's laid out in front of you in a visual and readable way, it's pretty easy to follow, but trying to put it into words is a little bit of a challenge. As you level up a Digivolution, reaching certain levels will unlock new Digivolutions stemming from that. If you have a Bearmon as your rookie and the Digivolution you're using is Grismon, you'll need to get Grismon to level 20 and have Bearmon's base spirit stat trained to 80 to unlock Kyubimon. If Grismon reaches level 30 and Bearmon has a wisdom stat of 80, you'll unlock the ability to Digivolve into Digitamamon. Digivolutions are naturally stronger than a rookie, so when you Digivolve, the Digivolutions you choose will take the stats of that rookie and amplify them. This seems to be determined by the specific Digivolution in question, and obviously stronger and stronger Digivolutions will amplify the base stats of the rookie more and more. The slightly confusing part is that the Digivolutions add to these stats, but it's also like these stats are being stacked on invisible inherent stats of the Digivolution. So, for example, a Greymon and Metal Greymon both have level 500 attack. This is after factoring in any amplification that they've done to the stats of their rookie form. Even though those numbers would be exactly the same in the strength section of their respective stat screen, the Metal Greymon's physical attacks is still gonna hit way harder. It's a more powerful form, it's automatically gonna be stronger, but its higher strength is not represented solely by the numbers you see here. Listen, I know it sounds like a lot of stuff, but if it's any consolation, this is by far the most difficult time I've ever had writing a video.
Let's get scratching.
Now, you may have noticed, unlocking certain Digivolutions in higher tiers will sometimes require more than just hitting a certain level. Anytime a Digivolution needs a level requirement and a stat in order to be unlocked, that stat requirement is referring to the stats of your rookie, not the amplified numbers of their Digivolution. Let's look at Guilmon's Digivolution tree. I have a Metal Mamemon and he's at level 40, but I also need a machine resistance level of 190 to unlock Metal Garurumon. Guilmon's machine stat isn't quite there, but when he Digivolves into Metal Mamemon, the stat amplification pushes it to over 190, but that does not matter. Guilmon is the one with the stat requirement, and no, equipping an accessory like a ring to artificially enhance a rookie's stat does not count. I tried it on Patamon when trying to unlock Skull Greymon. Your rookie needs to have been trained to that stat requirement either through level grinding or from the use of a gym, making gyms with more training options available even more important based on the Digivolution you're trying to achieve. Now, those aren't the only two kinds of requirements you might need to meet to unlock a certain Digivolution. Sometimes, you need to have unlocked multiple Digivolutions for a single rookie in order to gain access to a new one, which will obviously mean any Digivolutions required to get those Digivolutions are also required. Could also depend on getting a rookie and one of their Digivolutions to different levels. Like in Patamon's tree, you would need to unlock Anjouamon and get her to level 40, and also get Patamon to level 15 to unlock Rosemon. The really interesting thing about all of this is that the requirements to reach different Digivolutions will be different depending on the rookie that you're currently using. But every rookie can access every Digivolution, the road they need to take to achieve each is just going to be very different. Like, obviously, as you get Agumon up to level 40, he'll unlock Greymon, Metal Greymon, and War Greymon along the way. But it'll take a lot of legwork to unlock Grismon in that evolution tree, while it was the first evolution I unlocked for Bearmon. Now, outside of just seeing your favorite favorite Digimon and enjoying the natural buffs and higher forms, what are the other benefits of going out of your way for certain Digivolutions and leveling them up? That's where techs come in. So every Digivolution amplifies the stats of the rookie that they stem from, but that amplification does not change as the Digivolution levels up. That is all controlled by the base stats of the rookie, so a level 99 Stingmon won't be any stronger than a level 10 Stingmon if their rookies have the same stats. That said, as each Digivolution reaches higher levels, they will unlock new techs to use, something the rookie can't do on their own, and the techs they learn will depend on the Digivolution. As that Digivolution reaches higher levels, they may also unlock the ability to load the techs that they previously unlocked. To do this, you'll once again need to visit Piximon or the Digivolution Center, just like when you were swapping what unlocked Digivolutions your rookie has in their Digivolve slots. But there's a limit to how many techs you can load at once, and they only remain loaded as long as your rookie currently has that Digivolution the techs were learned by in one of their slots. This will allow any other Digivolution being used by that rookie to use those same techs, though they do require more MP to use. It's a handy way of passing certain abilities around, especially if you swap to another Digivolution for the same rookie that doesn't have any techs of their own yet. This loading ability is not offered to every tech though, as Digivolutions, once they reach a high enough level that usually requires a lot of grinding for DV experience, will have a special training technique unique to that specific Digimon, which leads to getting to use some signature moves like Metal Greymon using Giga Destroyer, Imperial Dramon using Mega Crusher, or Pale Dramon using Desperado Blaster. This one got me excited. I am disappointed in the animation for the Terra Force move though. It's just missing a little bit of that spice War Greymon should have when he's in this pose, but it's still the first time I've gotten to see this in action in one of the World games, so it is still neat. There will be times when you get a preview of these Digivolutions and attacks through two different means. The first is through DNA Digivolution, which works a lot differently than it did in Digimon World 2, and in a way will probably feel a bit more familiar to fans of the show. When tagging between two Digimon in battle, if each rookie has unlocked Digivolutions that are compatible with each other, as long as you're already using one of those Digivolutions, you can swap to the other and choose to spend a good chunk of MP to DNA Digivolve them, letting you temporarily fuse together into a new Digimon that will come swinging in with a special ability, like a strong attack or healing up your party and clearing them of status effects. This is a really cool feature, though I will admit, it's something that I found myself using very few times throughout the course of the game. The other method is through Blast Digivolving. There's a meter on the screen during battles that will gradually build when your Digimon takes damage. It's important to note though that if you have a counter crest equipped, this meter will not fill if your Digimon successfully counters an attack. You won't notice this thing budge much in the early game, but as you face tougher enemies and sustain stronger attacks, it'll fill up much faster. Once it's full, your Digimon will automatically blast Digivolve to their next natural Digivolution with access to their special ability, which will cost no MP to use, and their health is restored. This Digivolution will only stick around for a few turns until reverting back to your previous form, but it can really save you at the last second in a pinch by bringing your HP back to max and giving you a little taste of what you're working towards. It's honestly a really cool motivator. I love this feature. I feel like it starts really coming into play once you've got a better handle on game progression, right when the carrot on the stick is at its most enticing. Not to mention just how cool these Digivolution sequences always are. Like the DNA Digivolution sequence is just neat to see, but there's something exciting about the standard one too. Whenever I unlocked a new Digivolution, I would often keep myself from setting that as the default until I got to see the animation for changing to that form for the first time and hearing the very clear homage to Braveheart. There's a status effect in the game that can actually force your Digimon to de-Digivolve, and honestly, I never minded too much because at most it costs you one turn and it means an excuse to see this lovingly crafted animation again. I'm pretty sure you can skip it too if you want, but I never did. Overall, I really liked the Digivolution system in this game. It takes advantage of the training aspect, giving it that very hands-on approach I already appreciate about the Digimon World games, and while it can feel really rewarding to plan things out once you have the help of a chart in front of you, the way the Digivolutions branch off of each other maintains that fun element of surprise where you could go in blind, train naturally, and just sort of see what new creatures you end up with. It's both controlled and open-ended, and it's honestly one of the most well-realized elements of Digimon World 3, and an intelligent way to adapt the unique aspects of the Digimon franchise and incorporate them into a more traditional turn-based RPG format. It is hard to explain, and maybe it does really sound complicated, but once you have it in your hands and you start working towards your favorite forms, training those stats and building up those levels, it becomes this really rewarding system that constantly gives you the next next thing to work for. And that's when it starts playing into another aspect of progression through the game, and one that's understandably more contentious. Now that we understand the gameplay's core and what ties it together, how do we use these systems and mechanics to walk our way through the game, and how does our journey start to take on new and unexpected forms, just like our little digital companions?
Let's get scratching.
Understanding the gameplay you'll be spending the most time with is obviously important, but the progression extends further than just getting into fights and watching numbers go up. I mean, that is the majority of what you'll be doing, of course, but there is also the context of the world you'll be doing all of it in, and the events that change the motivation and nature of these mechanics. Our first destination will be the game's second little hub, Sirius City. We make our way there after doing some initial training, moving through some pleasant areas, and I even stumbled across a temple in a jungle out there. It didn't seem like there was a lot that we could do here just yet, but I always enjoy being able to stumble across areas that I'll need to come back to later, and still getting that sense that I discovered something on my own. Though that prediction of coming back to places really should have felt like foreshadowing. Along the way, I do come across a cute little log cabin that serves as another inn and save point. So it's nice to establish early on that these will be laid out between major areas so save points never feel overly out of reach. When we make it to Sirius City and try to challenge the leader though, he's not there and is apparently hanging out in the Protocol Ruins, which is that temple that we found earlier. Well, cool, I'm glad I explored because now I know just where to go. I'm gonna ignore these guys over here very wisely mouthing off to a random kid that they're here to spy on the functions of the game. Something so ominous certainly won't be relevant later. Once we're in the ruins, we search for the leader and even take on an optional fight against a Bearmon. Gotta say, I love the background for these boss fights. It's such a cool backdrop for these more serious encounters, and the fact that the game even has optional bosses to take on is cool. I like being able to put my training to the test, and when the reward is getting my Digimon even stronger through a big fight, it feels like something really worth taking the extra time for. We also get an item called the Old Wand. It doesn't seem like it'll do much good now, but we should hold on to it. You know, it might come in handy later. I do kind of wonder what it's for, though. Well, we've actually wandered off the beaten path, scurried through a maze in the forest, and beaten a pretty big Digimon in the dark recesses of this abandoned structure to find the Sirius leader, and he apparently won't fight us. Yeah, nah, I guess he thinks we're weak and not worth his time. Bro, I will end your whole career. After I travel all the way to the dino region to fight this dinosaur you told me to take out to prove my worth. Welcome to something we'll be seeing a lot of in this game. Padding. At least Tyranno Valley is kind of a neat place to visit, gives me some Digimon World 1 vibes, and it's not too far out of the way where we were, but the motivation here just feels so artificial and lame. Go fight this guy to fight me. Fine, it's fine. It's fine. Oh hey, we got an old claw for beating the Master Tyrannomon. I wonder what these old weapons are used for later. Okay, now we go back to take on the Sirius leader, and this time he's actually back in the city where he's supposed to be. Doesn't take too much to take this guy down, and we get a silver ticket for the gyms out of it, but we still have 3 badges to go. Oh hey, we ran into Teddy. That's right, we have friends that are also in this game. I had pretty much forgotten about them at this point. He's going on about being excited that some famous hacker by the name Lucky Mouse is also logged into the game, but that doesn't seem as important as the update that comes next, when we find out that the game, which I will remind you is currently inhabited by people from the real world, is suddenly undergoing emergency maintenance, and until it's finished, nobody can leave the game.
How many of you have seen
Sword Art Online?
Okay, yeah, sure, that's a little concerning, but also not anything we can do a whole lot about right now. Might as well just keep playing the game like nothing's off. Go over to the auction hall, win ourselves a cool shield for Patamon, get some use out of the black market, and make our way past Sirius City to the gondola that will take us over to the next area. Oh no, wait, we actually can't use this yet. Apparently, we need a blue card to operate it, and we need to go back to the city to get it from a Guilmon. I just sensed a bunch of people that grew up with this game all tense up in unison. We do get stopped along the way. Our name is getting around, and already this grown adult named Keith decides that he wants to throw down and become the main rival for this child. Wow, it really is feeling like an actual MMO. Well, once we beat him, it's time to go back to Asuka City to talk with this Guilmon that I saw here before, and where the hell is he? Well, he's not here. He's actually over in the inn, where he directs us to his cousin back in Seiryu, so I guess we're going back there. We meet the tricky Guilmon, nothing suspicious about that, and he gives us the blue card. But why is it spelled like that when you look at it in the inventory? I don't know, it's probably just a typo or something. Let's go try to use it. Surprise, it wasn't a typo. We were tricked by the tricky Guilmon. I'm gonna snap his little digital neck. We find another Guilmon back in Seiryu who tells us that the tricky Guilmon is probably hiding from us now, which is probably smart if he has any sense of self-preservation, because at this point, I'm even starting to wonder about my Guilmon. What do you know? We finally find the tricky Guilmon again, and in exchange for letting him live, he gives us the real blue card this time, and now we can actually move on with the game. This is not a totally isolated incident. The game will do stuff like this more than once, but at the very least, this was the one side event that felt the most egregious. There's maybe one other main quest that did get kind of dumb, but this was the one that drove me the craziest, but let's not get too comfortable just yet. Now we can finally enter the gondola and move on to the next part of the game, up until the device suddenly stops and the whole place begins to shake. Without warning, we're attacked by a huge Bulbmon, and this was the fight that I learned the importance about the speed stat, because I spent a decent amount of the fight not being able to touch him. But after that stupid fetch quest we were just on, it was actually pretty cool experiencing a mysterious event, some build up to a larger threat looming in the background. At this point, I was starting to get pretty interested into where the plot was going, because having some strange Digimon just running loose between the main areas of the game is pretty cool in and of itself. On our way to the next main city, we run into a very unfriendly Zombimon. We really aren't ready to be taking this guy on at this point, and we have to run away from him for now. This does start off another quest, one that introduces us to a couple of Digimon and sends us running around a few locations to retrieve the mask for one of them. This fetching errand is not as bad as the last one, especially since some of the events that take place here, like finding out that the Digimon we're trying to help has started causing problems around towns, is actually an Edamon in disguise. It's just a little more interesting than being yanked around by several Guilmon, but it's still tiresome considering you're still running back around to a few different areas you've already been to and explored, including the area you began the game in, and some of the places you need to go to trigger the next event are just kind of obtuse if you're not using a guide. The worst part though is that it's so soon after the Guilmon thing. I was getting really worried that this was something I'd have to be dealing with throughout the entire adventure. We do find out that that troublesome Edamon was actually an imposter, disguising himself as the Sepicmon that we were trying to help. We get the mask back, return it to the real Sepicmon, and he gives us some smelly herb that we can use to ward off Zombimon. Amazing! All of that running around, and all we had to do was force him to smell a spoiled cabbage. The environment here looks really cool though, and from here it's a straight shot. We arrive at Suzaku City, meet a new character named Lisa who asks us about cute green Digimon and shares her interesting taste, and we find and take on the Suzaku leader. No more running around either, we go right into the fight and get the second badge. I was relieved that making it to this leader didn't send us off on yet another wild quest, but now we have half the badges we need, and we do have a new set of tasks to do, but the events leading up to them and the justification for them are a huge improvement on what came before. We're told that the only way forward to the next major city is through the use of a special Digitama, or as this translation refers to it, a Digi-Egg. But before we can go hunting for it, we actually need to make a return to Asuka City, but the game actually has the decency to warp us straight there instead of making us walk the whole way back. There's still a pressing matter at hand here, that being the inability to log out of the game, which we still can't do, and people are starting to gather around the lobby, stating their concerns about being unable to leave. I do have a couple of notes here, elements that I think could have made this just a little bit stronger. The fact that the time of day doesn't change is a big one, but I do understand a couple of reasons as to why that might not work. One, past Past games have run with the concept that time works differently in the real world versus the digital one, but we've also seen that the digital world does experience both day and night, but it's also possible that on top of everything else going on in this game, trying to shove in a day and night cycle into the mix could have just been too messy to be worth it. I think a change in the time of day here would really help set the mood, but I at least understand why it wasn't implemented if it was ever even considered at all. Secondly, this should start getting more people to ask more questions. Like, can we be trapped in here at any time? What about our lives in the real world? We already couldn't log out before, but now we're being told that this vague problem hasn't been resolved and we still can't log out. That is an issue. The sense of vulnerability should be really kicking in at this point, and it's not a small deal. And like I mentioned before, it's stuff like this that makes me wish there was more clarification on how people are being transported into Digimon Online. Our main characters seem to be taking this seriously, at least. We finally get to see Kale again, and our friends are starting to play a larger role in the story and are given a bit more presence. They want to bust into the headquarters and try to get some answers from the game master. But lost or misplaced Digimon seem to be the only ones given access to those areas, so what if we were Digimon? Yeah, that old couple from before weren't just spouting off random dialogue, this was actually setting up this plan that would show up later. The old couple managed to get costumes that let them play the role of these fancy colored Agumon, and that's gonna be our ticket inside. As a matter of fact, that Edamon from before even comes into play here, as he's revealed to be a human himself, and has been making not only the Agumon disguises for the old couple, but the Edamon disguise for himself too. This also means that this guy was disguising himself as an Edamon who was disguising himself as a Sepikmon. Do people not sweat in the digital world? Ugh, that sounds terrible. This actually was not a twist I had anticipated, but it felt rewarding to see stuff from previous missions come back like this. It made it feel like those weren't wastes of time and also shows that the actions of our characters are making them more important as a part of this world, using the gears that keep it all running to their advantage. In return for keeping this guy's secret, we're awarded with our costumes. Look, Ma, I'm an Ablumon. We make our way into the game master's chamber back at the lobby, but along the way we discover that Teddy is missing and Kale has been acting kind of distant. On top of that, we're starting to uncover some conspiracies surrounding the game master we don't understand yet, and they seem intent on hunting down this Lucky Mouse hacker that Teddy mentioned before. After being discovered dropping eaves all over this conversation, we're actually recruited into the effort of finding Lucky Mouse, who's been blamed for all the problems the server is experiencing. All the while, Kale is acting more and more detached and secretive, seeming to have her own little mission she apparently needs to go on while we start our quest and head on to the west sector and see what we can find out. I was getting a lot more invested at this point with all the new mysteries unfolding. We knew from the beginning that while the government had apprehended members of this hacker group called the AOA, they would still come back in some way, and it seems reasonable to assume they're the ones behind the strange things happening. A strong rogue Digimon on the loose causing problems, our friend Teddy missing, our other friend keeping to herself and obviously not trusting us with some kind of information, and now we're being recruited to go find some potentially dangerous hacker by the people who seem to be having a hard time running this game. We have the pieces we need to start putting some stuff together, but there's still plenty of information outside of our reach. The only way to get answers is to make our way to the west sector, but we can't do that without that Digitama that we found out about before. This game is not always the best about directing you to your next objective, but moments like this actually do work, where exploring a little and taking the time to speak with NPCs near major areas we visit can give us clues on how to proceed. Making our way back to Suzaku City, we find a girl who mentions the crest of reliability. Now, from what I understand, I think she's actually talking about the Digi-Egg. I think we're mixing up some terminology here, but it's pretty easy to put together that the area she mentions seeing is where we want to go next. There's not a lot we can do with this shrine out in the woods at first, but after talking to our buddy Sepikmon, he tells us about how Bearmon can craft an explosive we can use to get into this shrine. But he's all the way back in the Protocol ruins, so yeah, we'll be doing some running around for that. There was a ton of back and forth here, but at least now these were people I was speaking to, not just copy and pasted NPC Digimon. They were characters I had already been introduced to, and the evolving context of goals between each destination kept it from feeling as tedious as that whole Guilmon thing. And I was also progressing in another way this entire time. The one thing I didn't really find myself doing a lot of in the main campaign of this game was level grinding. I was doing a lot of battling, but all while running between these different locations I needed to reach for these quests. I'm sure in a more fleshed out version of these experiences, there would simply be more locations locations to travel between and the world would be much larger, but there is an implicit coziness that comes from repeatedly doing things in areas you become more and more familiar with. And because I was running into so many random encounters along the way, it felt like there was a balance being struck here that kept me working towards a main goal while also getting into enough battles that my Digimon were constantly getting stronger. It didn't really feel like I had to drop working towards one accomplishment over the other. And when gathering items to craft the TNT chip for Bearmon, we get the ingredients as drop items from certain Digimon that we fight. It works gaining experience into the core missions that we're being sent on. Once we've gathered what Bearmon needs and gotten our explosive, we return to this docile shrine that I'm sure has some sort of divine significance and blow a hole right through the wall so we can get in. Jokes aside, I do really love the way this little area is constructed. As we make our way down into this lower room, we find the Digi-Egg waiting for us, and there's a calm hush sweeping through the air of this place. An ethereal light shining down on the item that we came for and gently disappearing as we claim our prize. It's a nice moment. It adds to this idea in my head that the digital world here exists, or at least did exist, as its own plane of reality with its own history and lore before it became the hub for this commercially available MMO. In all honesty, it really makes me wish that we got to know a little bit more about how the Digimon of this world feel about their home essentially serving as a huge tourist attraction. It makes me wonder if maybe that's an element that was present in the original Japanese text that was lost in translation. That sort of thing has happened in games before. It just feels like it's too interesting a concept to go unexplored. With this Digitama obtained, we can now call on Submerimon, an aquatic Digimon that can ferry us between locations through the use of these docks littered across the domains we've been traveling through this entire time. The way the seabeds themselves are laid out are really very simple, arranged as hallways essentially connecting two docks, maybe throwing a third one in there sometimes that will lead you around the map. At this point in the game, we're opening up a lot of new areas to explore, and backtracking between them would be really tiresome on foot. So these alternate routes are a great way of easing the tedium, but also rewarding you for paying attention to where you've seen docks like these before and using them to your advantage, experimenting with them to see how they'll offer fast and convenient routes between a bunch of locations. I did get a little bit of a scare early on when I was trying to use one of these seabeds to enter a new area, but the game actually froze up on me when I tried to emerge from the water and I had to reset the game. Thankfully, I didn't lose a lot of progress, but it did make me pretty nervous about using this for a bit, but thankfully, it seemed like it was a one-time bug because the problem never happened again, not even using the same seabed. The only thing that feels a little weird maybe is the controls, where you can change direction, but triangle controls everything else, making you move forward but also dive deeper. Releasing triangle will essentially make you rise up to the surface. It's not that hard to figure out, but it does feel a little wonky at first, especially if you're trying to stop at a specific spot, like grabbing a chest at the bottom of a seabed. We can use Submerimon to travel to the next major area, the Badlands, but when we try to enter Byakko City, we run into a little Numamon who tries to tell us to turn back. We don't listen, of course, but we notice that the city is basically deserted with no Digimon, and every human here is a massive jerk. We take on the leader of the city, but that just lands us in a trap room where we're dropped down into a dungeon where the real citizens of Byakko have been held. The people running around the city now are all hostile imposters. Thankfully, it looks like that Numamon from before has been helping the real citizens escape this prison and offers us a hand too, even if it does kind of seem like he's annoyed with us. I mean, we did blatantly ignore his advice. We're directed towards the new haven of the Byakko citizens, the Mirage Tower. But we have to navigate this Lost Woods style maze in the desert to find it. No catchy music to help us find our way through this either, but at least some marooned Digimon from before instructed us on how to escape back to the entrance if we can't find our way out. Once at the Mirage Tower, we find the real Byakko City leader and are greeted with the incredibly unsurprising revelation that the people in the city now are actually the elusive AOA. Yeah, see, we knew they were gonna be coming back at some point. We're awarded with our third badge, but we're also basically instructed to just go find that Numamon from before, so taking this guy on didn't really do a lot for us in the short term. We track Numamon down in a factory and have to do a lot to chase this guy down. He was helpful before, but really doesn't seem to want to deal with us on a personal level, but we're not gonna give him a choice. We chase him through rooms, up ladders, down corridors, and when we finally get to this guy, we discover that this Numamon is actually not a Digimon and is, in fact, Lucky Mouse, the man that we've been tasked with tracking down and apparently the scapegoat of the real troublemakers the Megami Corporation, which is actually made up of AOA members. They're not actually having trouble keeping the servers up. They're the ones sabotaging it and trapping people inside, while also enacting a plan that will allow them to use the digital world to gain access and control over the networks of the real world and essentially take it all over. The AOA are the ones who have Teddy. That girl Lisa from before is working with Lucky Mouse, who we learn is actually named Kurt, but the AOA decide to crash this little get-together of ours and reveal they also captured Kale, who is also Kurt's sister, which explains why she was acting so strange before and seemingly defensive when we were sent on a mission to track down Lucky Mouse, but at the time, I actually thought the twist was going to be that she was the infamous hacker. But the fact that she's his sister is still pretty close, so I can pretend I'm smart. The AOA are here to obtain a strange kind of Digitama Kurt has been protecting and are using Kale as leverage to get it. Right now, we don't know what they're planning on doing with this thing, but we don't really see an option other than exchanging it for our friend. Kurt does try to fight back, but the AOA general has some kind of ray gun he uses on Kurt to turn him into a pig. Or I guess more specifically, an Oinkmon, a completely useless and totally non-verbal Digimon that I'm pretty sure only exists in this game, and unlike every other Digimon we've encountered, it cannot speak and can only squeal. And now one of the most important people on the server with the only means, knowledge, and skill to fight off this core of cyber terrorists is one of these Oinkmon. At least we still have some Digimon of our own, and we managed to fight off our attackers before heading off to go take down their leader back in Asuka City. Trouble is, once we make it back, we discover that the gate to the city is closed off and we can't get in. Well, not the normal way at least. We use Submarimon at this nearby dock to dive underwater and find a secret entrance. But this Datamon we run into feels an arbitrary need to fight us before telling us that we can't actually go this way and need to get a staff pass from Kurt, the guy we just left. So we gotta go run all the way back there now. I guess along the way, we'll pop in and chat with an old friend. It turns out Bearmon can actually change the name of your Digimon for you, but only the rookies. As a matter of fact, no matter what they Digivolve into, your Digimon's display name will always be that of their rookie form, and you can't just grant nicknames to every Digivolution you unlock for them, which I was honestly hoping would be the case. See, in Digimon World 2, I did that thing where I named all my Digimon after my YouTuber friends, but this time I was gonna do something else where I was going to name my Digimon after my Patreon supporters. My roommate recommended that, and I thought it was a cute idea, but the way it's set up here, it really doesn't work out, so I guess I'll have to keep that idea in my pocket for a future video. I guess joke names it is for now. Well, Kurt can't do much for us right now, but Lisa tells us to go get some buddies of hers to help find this staff pass, one of whom is Keith. Yeah, that one immature guy from before, and while we do have to track all the way out to go find him, the game at least has the mercy to teleport us back to the secret room once we do. Turns out in their organization, Lisa is in charge of these two morons, and they help her look around the place for the pass, which would be a lot easier to find if this place wasn't such a mess. Oh well, I guess that's just what happens when you live like a pig. We find the staff pass, travel all the way back to Datamon, and he lets us into the secret entrance of the Megami headquarters, where it's time to start getting some stuff done here. We battle the remaining guards, making our way back up to the Game Master's chamber, where we encounter whatever this is. We're approached by some creepy little Digimon called Bearmon, who claims to feed on other Digimon before picking a fight with us. We defend ourselves, but he retreats. We don't have time to worry about small fry like him right now though, as we need to head inside to take on the Game Master, where we see her speaking with some kind of mysterious figure, because of course there's another stronger force above her controlling all of this, why wouldn't there be? Once we take her down, Lisa and the others show up, revealing that they're basically internet cops and, oh yeah, Teddy got rescued somewhere along the way and is helping them out now. Kinda forgot about you, buddy. But hey, you got out of your little pickle and you're actually helping support the team. Godspeed, Teddy. Sadly, while interrogating the Game Master, we discovered that the AOA was successful in gaining control over the Earth's global networks and are planning to use the Bearmon creature from before and manipulate its ability to fuse with other creatures and technology to destroy the world. Well, what kind of sense does that make? You live in the world, why would you want to destroy it? That's a little bit of a step up from global conquest, but sure, go off, Queen. How do we stop this from happening? Well, it looks like we need to go chat with some other AOA members to get info out of them, and we start seeing other players in the game forming a resistance, pushing back against the AOA, and with the help of Lisa, even managed to take back Byakko City. We visit the prison to talk to an AOA general who reveals that the Bulbmon we encountered from before is also a part of their plans, as he has the ability to move between the different servers the game is running on and is also causing crazy earthquakes as it's literally shaking the digital foundation the game is built on. In order to find the rest of the AOA faction, we have to follow Bulbmon's path of destruction and move through the now exposed code of the game, and this This is really cool. We're walking around through this wild path of circuitry, numbers, and code to travel to the game's neighboring server, which is such a fun idea when toying with how an MMO works. Even on our way here, we started encountering way stronger Digimon, even in the opening areas, because the walls keeping parts of this game apart are breaking, which is a brilliant way to evolve the game's difficulty in familiar areas with the game's evolving plot. Makes it feel more immersive and gives what's happening more stakes, while also offering a greater challenging gameplay and also greater rewards for winning battles. We do encounter Bearmon again, and he puts up a tougher fight from before, but hey, we can put up a tough fight ourselves and manage to put him down this time. We emerge from the game's code to enter the Amaterasu server, a much darker and more twisted version of the world we were traveling through before. This entire server has been totally taken over by the AOA, and even areas here that would have been friendly and safe in the Asuka server are now more dangerous and hostile. Most of the players in this server have also been turned into Oinkmon, thinning out who we can rely on to help us fight against the attacking forces, but we do run into someone friendly who gives us the Crony ID, which we can use to trick the AOA guards into thinking we're affiliated with them. The areas here are laid out like the ones we've seen before, but everything is darker now. The water is all a creepy blood red, and the Digimon we encounter are much stronger. You can taste the hostility in the air. You can feel the looming threat approaching as we start making our way to the server's cities to defeat the AOA chiefs there. As we defeat the first chief and obtain some item called the Blue ID, we're also treated to a scene of what's happening in the real world, as the devices everyday citizens rely on are all starting to go haywire, showing us that everything our enemies are setting into motion are already starting to have real consequences, and honestly, just seeing average people reacting to a huge threat like this always adds a lot of weight to what's going on. Like, it's not just some vague what-if scenario, people are already being affected and it's causing a panic. It doesn't take long to reach the next city, even using the Blue ID from before to trick this stupid trooper into thinking that we're the chief from the previous town, so he lets us in to go take out his boss and get the Red ID badge, also leading us to obtaining a truly important item that we need, the Digitama of Knowledge. This will let us summon Digimon, but he doesn't travel through the water, he travels underground, and we've been seeing access points he can use all over the game up to this point. Outside of just finding the other AOA forces, this was the other reason we came to the Amaterasu server. And now that we have it, we need to travel back to the Asuka server and use this new method of travel to make our way to the server's final city, Genbu City. Okay, before all of that though, I'm gonna go back and change these stupid names back to normal. I just can't do this anymore. Now, these underground mazes are a little more complicated than the seabeds, but can also be very helpful once you figure out how to navigate them. The way rooms are laid out are very samey, and there's a lot of different turns you can make, causing more confusion than you'd get from the straight shot hallways underwater, but I did find a wonderful guide that helps these underground passages make a lot more sense and will also turn these paths into your best friend, because they open up shortcuts not just between areas that you'll want to travel to, but also between areas across both servers. Once you've got a proper map for these, Digimon's ability turns into an absolute godsend for the rest of the game's backtracking. We've basically maximized our ability to travel in this game, and as we challenge the Genbu leader and earn his trust, we're awarded with the final badge, and we needed to head off to find the teleportation chamber that gives us temporary access to the real world. It seems like the AOA are trying to use their control over the world's digital networks to get access to a huge secret military weapon called the Juggernaut. Obviously, this means that we need to head over there and stop them, which leads us through a dungeon structure where we have to fight off against several knights and witches that are blocking the way. Please let me through, I'm kind of on the clock here, this is more important than whatever you got going on. When we finally make our way through the dungeon and enter the chamber room, we're discovered that we'll only have a few minutes, not including time in battles, to navigate the military base and put a stop to the Juggernaut's launch. It's actually really cool being able to move around in the real world like this, and in a military base no less. I think it's the first instance of actual gameplay set in the real world in a Digimon game so far, but the fact that we can bring our Digimon out here and fight with them spills some pretty troubling implications if the AOA could do the same. We do work our way through here, and we do battle a lead trooper, but it turns out this was all a diversion, and we actually failed to stop Juggernaut's launch, which was being controlled from a different location while we were kept busy over here. We're booted back into the digital world, and we're treated to an FMV of this battleship setting out to sea, the streets of the real world barren and quiet as the people have all evacuated. Broken and scrambled emergency signals trying desperately to warn the citizens of the coming danger. I've heard people say before that the plot of this game is nothing to write home about and isn't very interesting, and I disagree wholeheartedly. I do think the character interactions are weak. I mean, I think the characters in general aren't really all that great, but at least there's enough there to get an empathetic basis, where you feel for what they're going through and trying to prevent, and while the translation and presentation can be really sloppy at times, there's moments like this where the intent just shines through, and I don't know, man, I just think it's really cool. These are some crazy stakes, and it's hard not to get invested and want to see just how our heroes will pull through in the face of this massive threat. We meet back up with Lisa in Asuka's city, and she takes us with her to interrogate the Game Master, and in a perfect depiction of what I mean when it comes to sloppy character interactions, Lisa convinces the woman who is trapped behind bars to give her information, promising to surrender to the AOA in return after she gets the info she needs, and then Lisa just says that she lied. I'm such an idiot, the Game Master claims. Yes, you are! We discover that the AOA president residing in Amaterasu City is the only one who can stop the Juggernaut, and we need to make our way to him quickly because they have successfully transported Bearmon to the giant battleship. And you will not believe how cool this next part is. Bearmon fuses with the Juggernaut and becomes a horrifying hybrid monster that wipes out a whole army of ships at once. This is Destromon. I said it about Neo Crimson in the last game, but this is just one of the coolest things in the franchise. I don't know what it is about Digimon just fusing with crap, but it's usually a recipe for greatness. We head to the Amaterasu server, but we can't go barging into Amaterasu City just yet. Trust me, if you try, you will get bodied by these Nightmon, probably getting a game over and losing whatever progress you hadn't saved up to that point. Instead, we need to go check in with how the Resistance is coming along. Well, we had a rebellion form in the Mirage Tower in the Asuka server, so we check the same location in this server, and sure enough, we speak to the Resistance leader who tells us that they need the code passes to get past the Nightmon guarding the city, and when we return to Lisa and explain this to her, she tells us that we actually already have half of them because they're the colored ID passes held by the AOA chiefs in the cities of the Amaterasu server, so for once, we're actually starting a quest with a lead. We head back to take them out, get one ID pass, and move to the next, and by the time we make it to the final chief, his guards already know who we are and what we're there for and just directs us right to him for a fight. How refreshing. We fight, he loses. With all 4 passes in hand, we make our way back to the Amaterasu City, where Lisa and the Resistance are already beginning their charge, wiping out the AOA occupying the location, and we move on in to take out the heavier troops and make our way into the AOA headquarters, all the while Destromon is ripping things apart outside, opening fire on a populated city. No, wait, okay, it actually looks like it was just a big factory or something, but people were probably still working there, and it's also right outside a populated city. Oh man, this is crazy. Seriously though, we are pretty down to the wire here. We make it to the president and challenge him. It's really not a hard fight at this point. We've got some pretty tough Digimon, and for the reasons I stated before, I wouldn't exactly say this game is known for its demand for strategy or skill, but it still feels really cool to have come this far. At the very least, he does have a Raidenmon that can heal itself and counterattacks, but it's not enough. As we earn our victory, we now have access to deactivating Juggernaut and by extension, Destromon, which is good because now he actually is turning his attention to a populated city, and just before he manages to attack, we finally bring him to a stop, ending his rampage. This is already a kind of insane amount of just stuff happening, and the destruction of Destromon is really cool and kind of a huge deal, but we're not done just yet. Back in Digimon Online, our friends comment on the problem we're facing since the chamber that can return players to the real world still aren't working properly, and the one guy who could fix them, Kurt, is still a useless Oinkmon. Keith discovers a machine that he can use to return every human-turned Oinkmon back to normal, but because we need to be given the runaround one more time, we can only activate it by powering it up with a windmill, and for that, we'll need to speak with an Airdramon back in Asuka's server to get it moving. Once it's done and we return to Keith, it seems he was successful, and look, everyone is back to normal. Oh man, who knows how long these people were trapped like that. Ah man, I'm so glad we were able to save everyone, and okay, I might have some regrets about saving a few of you. Kurt is finally back to his old self, and he's working on fixing up the chamber to get everyone home. So in the meantime, we'll report back to the master room in Asuka City, where we see a bunch of Oinkmon. And now there's a group of Bearmon. Oh, Cool, awesome. Those Bearmon are running around turning everyone into Oinkmon again, and I guess multiplying while they're at it. There's even this little Patamon out here that seems legitimately distressed that their tamer has been changed, and it's actually really sad to see. Back in Amaterasu, we run into Kale, who tells us that the Bearmon are running around like crazy, turning everyone into Oinkmon and have infiltrated the real world, doing the same there. It's a full-on invasion in 2 worlds, and my understanding is that the reason everyone is being turned into these helpless creatures isn't just to stop them from resisting, but it will also make it easier to be consumed by Bearmon, making them even stronger. Now, what's the explanation behind Junior and Kale keeping their original human form and not being turned into Oinkmon like everyone else? With everyone else turned now, even including Lisa, her colleagues, and the entire resistance, the fate of both worlds falls entirely on our shoulders as we're approached by the surprise real villain of the game that's been pulling the strings from the shadows the entire time. His name is Bad Trope. Okay, no, it's actually Lord Megadeth, which is just precious. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little confused about this guy, like what he is, where he came from, and how he relates to everything else. Well, it turns out the Juggernaut and Destromon were, again, just decoys. What he really wanted was a different military super weapon, but this time, it's not a ship. No, it's a giant satellite by the name of Gunslinger that's currently orbiting the planet, and this is the final battleground where Lord Megadeth will make his last stand with us. The one he has deemed to be the world's strongest tamer. We follow him to Gunslinger, we decimate everything along the way, because at this point, I finally worked my way up to earning an Omnimon for one of these games, because, you know, I hadn't gotten one before, and I love him, and I wanted him here for this big climactic showdown. Oh, cool! There's just an encounter with an Armageddonmon here. That's not a big deal or anything. We make it up to the big bad where he tries to explain himself a bit more. He claims to be a creature born from the digital world, which... yeah, I've heard of those. Pretty sure they're just called Digimon. He wants to feed Bearmon through energy to become his ultimate weapon and help him rule over all creation, replacing humans as the dominant beings, proclaiming his superiority in a symphony of destruction wrought through the flames of a holy war. Third random Megadeth song name. He explains the stages of evolution he wants Bearmon to acquire next, with the next stage being... Snatchmon. I literally just fought a monster with a much better name than that. Who thought that one up? Of course, as soon as Bearmon digivolves into Snatchmon, he's too powerful to feel a need to take orders and betrays Megadeth on the spot. And now he wants to be our big rival, and he goes off to merge with the Gunslinger satellite, turning into the being known as Galacticmon. But even that isn't enough, as his final act of judgment will be to face us in one last duel as we try to stop him from using this immense new form and power from merging with the planet Earth itself to become Gaiamon. That is really cool. Okay, so to get here, we had to go through some pretty painfully bad dialogue, tropes, and sudden betrayals and exposition with no sense of buildup, but the payoff is being transported out into orbit to battle Galacticmon among the stars as he threatens to fuse with our planet, wiping out every living creature on it to become a supreme being. There's just no way to convince me this isn't cool as hell. What's interesting to me is that when we make it through the first phases of this fight, we're faced with the final phase, a head-on collision with this daunting enemy, and this is the music that the American and European versions of the game use in their opening FMVs. It's a cool choice, and it really lends to the feeling that we're in the end game. It just can't get any bigger from here. If it did, that would mean we lost. We pull through, defeating Galacticmon and sending him flying into the atmosphere he tried to become a part of, undone by the scorching flames of its embrace as he breaks apart in a scattered, blazing display. The day is won, and we've saved 2 worlds at once. Back where it all began, on the street corner in the real world. We saved the entire planet and we pick back up 3 months later. Our character waits for his friends to arrive for the opening ceremony as Digimon Online is about to finally reopen. This time, Megami has been disbanded and the MMO is run by Kurt, the new champion of the game. We get a glimpse of everyone being returned to normal, with the real world healing from the events of our crazy little adventure and life moving on after coming so close to ending. This really was a cool, fun, and memorable adventure. I really enjoyed my time with Digimon World 3. This has some of the best balancing of core gameplay that I've seen in the series up to this point. Some of the greatest music, a unique and rewarding Digivolution system, and a narrative that isn't great on its finer details, but still delivers on some big, exciting moments, and the broad strokes do come together in a lot of great ways. I found myself connecting really easily to the way this world is presented, with the fantastic sprite work used not only in the overworld and training sequences, but also in the finer details, bringing back that visual element I loved so much from the first game, where abandoned electronics are scattered around through a natural landscape and there's a ton of recognizable items and iconography hidden in the background of the areas you visit. There's even visual elements that just go a long way to sell the world you're in, like showing the immense difference in scale between certain types of Digimon, showing how stronger forms will just tower over the rookies. The one distracting element is that while these environments you move around in are all really well made, the game seems to have some trouble loading them in, and I know you've seen these big blue squares plaguing the screen throughout the video. As you run around, the areas you explore need loading, and it can get pretty annoying having to slow down because you're literally outpacing how long it takes these things to get off your screen and let you actually see where you're going. I would really like to see a version of the game run without this hindrance. The tone of these areas are set so well by the music, though I will say the OST could have used more event-specific tracks that play during certain cutscenes. That way, moments that should have a feeling of tension or dark implication aren't backed by cheery bleeps and blops that come packaged in with certain rooms. I do like that the backtracking can lead to less need for level grinding since it incorporates the encounter rate into the stuff that you're being sent out doing, but I do think it's worthwhile to acknowledge that this sort of thing does offer a solution to something a lot of people often find hard to excuse in RPGs, even if I don't think they stuck the landing in this regard. What I got here was a gameplay experience that did admittedly feel a little disjointed in places. I wish I didn't have to rely on a guide as much as I did to determine where to go next, but even then there were moments that just speaking with NPCs and exploring would just get me in the right direction. The benefits I mentioned don't fully negate how overbearing the frequent backtracking can be, but it never felt quite as mind-numbingly repetitive as Digimon World 2. And in the end, as I saw those credits roll, I think I really understood what it is about this game that makes it stand out to people, that makes it so memorable, that makes it stand as the pinnacle of classic Digimon games in the main campaign. You'll remember that I chose to review the 2003 version of this game for a reason. I mentioned a couple of small differences here and there between this and the other versions, but the biggest difference between Digimon World 3 and Digimon World 2003 was the main reason that people suggested I play the latter. The post-game content is the main package that people insisted I would be missing out on in the American release, the main draw for experiencing a more complete version. And I want to fight each and every person that suggested this version just for that. The post-game content in Digimon World 2003 sounds fairly simple on paper. Junior's original goal in Digimon Online was to defeat every leader, gain every badge, and become the Digimon champion. Well, we got the 4 badges from the leaders in the Asuka City server, but we're actually not there anymore. Digimon Online is being rebuilt from the ground up in the Amaterasu server. It just looks normal and not like hell now. Hey, just popping in, I wanted to go ahead and throw this in last minute because I was in the middle of editing and noticed that I completely forgot to put something in the script. When you get into the post-game stuff in the European version, it seems like there's some differences in the translation. Like, I think it was probably localized at a different time, possibly by different people, because these were 2 different releases. And so when you talk to NPCs, they'll refer to Digimon under their original non-localized names, but there's also some dialogue that's even in reference to like alcohol and stuff. Like, it's more mature, unfiltered. There's not a lot to say about that, but it's something that like stood out to me and I thought it was interesting, so I thought it would be a shame to not include it in the video. So yeah, there's that. Let's go back to the other stuff that was already in here before. We beat up some guys in the cities in this server before, but those were AOA chiefs. So that means now we gotta go challenge the 4 leaders of this server and gather their badges so we can take on Kurt and become the new champion. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? It's not! The leaders here want nothing to do with us at this stage because we don't have what are known as the epic weapons. Remember those items we got before? The relics like the old claw and the old wand? Those were different items that will start you off on a weapon forging quest, and it essentially takes two different forms. One in the old version of Digimon Online and another in this version of the game. In the old servers, you would hop between places, gathering up items that you would have to forge together to make new items and then forge those ones together, so on and so forth. I actually didn't waste much time on that before because I vaguely knew that those epic weapons had something to do with the post-game, and I figured I could save them for later when I was actually tackling that stuff. This was a mistake. The weapon forging quests have taken on a new form in Kurt's version of the game because now only a fraction of the areas are actually available. You can't move past where the gondola would originally take you, and you can't access the Asuka server at all. You are confined to these main areas, but there is still hope. Those access points like the holes for digging into the underground circuit boards and docks leading into the seabeds are still around, but now they work a little differently and are all confined to dead ends or simply leading to other spots within these new confined spaces. That said, the items that you need for the epic weapon quests can be found here. A very limited number of these items needed for these quests can be bought in the Amaterasu server shops, but the rest are hidden in chests along the seabed and on circuit boards. Again, I'll link to some very helpful fan-made maps that will guide you through these locations. There's also an underground circuit board that leads you to tough card battles where you can earn epic cards, and I don't care. So, it sounds like you've got everything you need right here, but there is a catch. The Digimon waiting in these areas give you these quest items, but will only appear if all of your Digimon are level 45 or higher. That means your rookie Digimon, and I don't just mean the 3 you start out with, and I also don't mean 5 of them, 1 for each epic weapon, although that would be true if you do this quests in the pre-Galacticmon game. No, I mean you need to go out there and recruit all 8 possible rookie Digimon and get all of them to level 45. At least I did do a part of this before entering post-game. Shortly after the Game Master recruits you to hunt down Lucky Mouse, these Digimon experts, or DRI agents, can be found across the game that will send you on a mission to track down a strong Digimon connected to the rookie you're trying to recruit. So, for example, you'll fight a Metal Greymon to get the Agumon D DNA, or Digital DNA for the agents in question. Bring the D DNA to the agent and they'll allow you to swap one of your partner Digimon to the newly recruited rookie by visiting the lab or Piximon. Just like with the major items, they do make these recruitment missions available on the post-game circuit boards, but I had actually gone out of my way to recruit every possible rookie Digimon much earlier in the game, essentially because I could, I guess. There's the classic complications here, where you have to know where to find these agents in the first place, and they'll only give you the time of day if the rookie Digimon that you have on you share a high or low enough collective level. But outside of that, in finding the Digimon they send you to fight, these missions really aren't half bad. But getting those rookies all to level 45 after recruiting them, that's a little different. Remember that a Digivolution can level up pretty quick, but a rookie Digimon takes a lot more work and a lot of standard experience points. For context, when I beat the main campaign of the game, I only had 1 rookie Digimon at level 45. 80 hours into the game. Here's where it gets fun. So this is stemming off a problem that was already present in the main game. Get far enough in, and you start hitting a threshold where the amount of experience you can expect to get from battles kind of caps out. Like there's this one spot in a jungle shrine where you can grind through Numemon quickly enough, I guess, but they only have so much experience to give, and the amount you need to level up your rookie just keeps getting higher and higher. And you run out of tougher enemies to go out and find, because as your rookie levels up, you stop encountering enemies that offer a significant boost in progress to get to the next level. It's how I realized that if you really wanted to, you could really easily just get through this whole main game focusing entirely on 1 rookie Digimon to level up instead of spreading the experience across 3 of them. Basically keeping the other 2 around just to be able to use revive items, and it actually just might be more efficient than trying to raise 3 of them. But now I'm in a spot where I need to get 8 of these little squeebs up to level 45, which takes a really long time, and now I don't even have access to that 1 Numemon spot to grind at. That's okay though. There's a few fishing spots around here that could be good for consistent grinding. There's even this one with Pink Bearmon that can sometimes, very rarely, drop items that will give your Digimon extra SP for training their stats. Plus, there's always the experience adapter, right? Well, not for me. I realized too late that there was this item in the game that you should be able to equip and enhance the amount of experience your Digimon receives after battles. Trouble is, you get this in the Amaterasu server's equivalent of that triple layered dungeon we fought through to access the secret chamber room, but it also requires you to fight the knights and the witch that reside there. I couldn't do that because I was too late. By the time I tried, I was at the point in the game right before the final area where every human NPC in the game had been turned into an Oinkmon, including these guys. I was locked off from fighting them, and in the post-game, this area is entirely inaccessible. And for whatever reason, this just seems to be the one important item that you can't find in a chest in the post-game circuit board. Whatever, man. Apparently it's not even adaptive to your level. Like, I thought the amount of extra experience it grants you would depend on the level of your rookie, but no, it just grants an extra 20% boost to whatever you would get from that specific enemy. In the long run, it's really not that helpful. That means I was just stuck here with each and every rookie, trying to find the best level spots to grind through Numamon maybe? Nah, their encounter rate is too infrequent and they run way too often. Fishing those at Bearmon? I mean, sure, but they're really far away from the only available gym, and it makes me do a ton of running around back and forth between tasks so I can train specific stats on my Digimon between them leveling up. Oh yeah, another little difference here in the European version. There's a limit to how many times you can successfully cast your line while fishing. So after a certain amount of tries, you have to leave the screen and then come back in to start fishing again, or you just can't catch anything. So that's fun. Thank you for that. There was a ton of trial and error. I experimented with all sorts of methods and locations and everything I could think of to speed up this process, but in the end, it really just led to me adding an extra 90 to 100 hours of playtime, all of which was level grinding and training to this time I had already spent playing the game. The sharp turn the game takes here really soured my experience. There were a couple of things I could have done earlier in the game to make this a little bit easier, but there still isn't a way to avoid this stuff adding a ton of time to the experience doing the one thing that feels the most brainless and tedious. Like, at a certain point in this game, you learn what stats to train, what to equip, and battles aren't even easier, they're just faster, I guess. It's just monotony, and all for a completely arbitrary threshold because I'm spending all of this time training and level grinding these Digimon I would never even use. I mean, I guess because of this, I got to see a bunch of these available Digivolutions. I got to run around with Kotemon, and I developed a new appreciation for this cool little guy. And I would pull out a third positive here for the rule of threes, but I don't really think there is one. This was one of the most miserable things I've ever done because it was just work. It took so long with far less actually happening than the entire time I spent playing the main game, and again, I gotta stress, it was only because I had to, because after all of this level grinding, I never once used more than just Bearmon and his Digivolutions to play through the rest of the game. 100 hours later, 100 hours later, I finally moved on to the circuit board where now that all my rookies were level 45 or higher, I could actually find and talk to the Digimon that will give you the items you need to forge the epic weapons. I was feeling relief at this point, and it helped that the progression here was actually really quick and even offered a few boss fights along the way as I moved through the boards. With the 5 weapons finally crafted, I went out to go take on these 4 battles with the Amaterasu leaders, and wouldn't you just know it, I barely even had to think about what I was doing while just blasting through these fights. These guys sure seem to set some pretty high standards for a group of dorks that can hardly even put up a fight against me. I did it. I beat them. I went to go find Kurt. The arena is neat. I think the in-game brands scattered around the background are a cute touch. The music is cool. The Digimon he has are cool. It's a little disappointing that the coolest ones here, though, were also just random encounters that I fought in a space station that turned into a giant monster in the actual end game, but they're cool here too, I guess. At this point, I just decided to get Bearmon access to Digivolving into Imperial Dramon Paladin mode. It's like the ultimate possible Digivolution you can obtain in this game, and yeah, he single-handedly won this whole match. And that's it. I guess I'm the Digimon champion now. There's no fanfare, no secondary credit sequence. It's just over. I've never had an experience quite like this, where I got to the end of a game that I actually really liked, only to be met with a secondary part that just sapped the enjoyment that I was having in a dull, Kafkaesque sea of repetition and erasure of time, to the point that my opinion turned south so hard. Not on the whole game, mind you. I still like the main stuff just fine, but I never want to touch the post-game of this title ever again. It's not even like the battles you get out of it are all that satisfying. It's all just disappointing. I actually did consider holding off on the postgame and waiting for another project. At some point, I think it would be neat to do a video about the postgame content of all the other Digimon games I've covered, and I briefly considered saving this for that, but I literally can't do that and record footage of it in the way that I have for this. To play this on original hardware, I am once again using a Unirom memory card on my PS1 to boot up the European disc, but it gets wonky with the cords that I use. It seems to work well enough with this cheap Hyperkin PlayStation to HDMI cord, but when I tried to upgrade to these much nicer RGB cables through Retrovision, that's when I started getting this red line in the footage, but I don't think it's a problem with the cord because it works just fine with my other import games. The Hyperkin cable seemed like the safer bet, though the footage wasn't as clean, but it was starting to weaken and sound wouldn't capture sometimes if it wasn't sitting in the exact right way, so I tried to replace it with a new version of the same brand and got this. So I tried to replace that cord with another pre-owned one, and I got the same thing. This cord, this poor dying little cord, was the only thing working for capturing footage of this game this way, so I knew if I was going to do this at all, it would have to be while it was still working. The thing I have to remind myself when it comes to all of this though is that this is stuff after beating Galacticmon, and it's all supplementary. It's there if you want to do it, but it's not a requirement for just beating the game, and it's not like you're really missing much if you skip this. I mean, honestly, after the final battles through the Gunslinger domain, having a little one-on-one with this one guy that we spent half the game trying to turn back into a human in a barren arena with no audience doesn't really feel like it lives up to what we've already accomplished. The post-game was basically a hellish experience, probably worse than anything I actually had to do in Digimon World 2, but if I'm taking a step back and looking at the main meat of the game, can I recommend it on its own, separated from the negative experience I had in the extra content? After putting the work in, and after seeing firsthand what it's like to play through all of the main content of this game, and I swear if there is a single pedant out there that wants to challenge me on that because of the TCG crap in this game, I am going to blow up the sun. I do recommend the main campaign of Digimon World 3. I mean, I would even recommend it through the 2003 version. Apparently, some fans recently released a version of this that has the balancing of the 2003 version, but with the 60 FPS of the American release. But the post-game content is one of the worst experiences I have ever had in a video game, with no sense of payoff whatsoever. But even that is not enough to erase the triumphs of the main package. Flawed though it may be, the core experience of Digimon World 3 offers a welcoming world, an experimental and interesting leveling and digivolution system, and an experience that I think wouldn't be hard to recommend to players of the modern day. For my personal tastes, my favorite game in this series so far is still the first title, but what I was greeted with here is still an unforgettable experience that I know for a fact I'll be returning to bring all of the knowledge I have now to a new playthrough and to experience this again as a more seasoned player. Sure, I won't play through everything here again, but I don't think it's such a terrible thing to say that I'll be satisfied with stopping my playthrough when the credits roll. So yeah, you know what? I do recommend Digimon World 3. Maybe it's appropriate that my final thoughts on this game are a little jumbled and confused, but just like the game itself, I hope that the core of what I've tried to say and convey has come through. For those of you who have waited years to hear my thoughts on this title, thank you so much for your patience. I really hope that you got what you were looking for. And for those of you that just kind of found this video another way but decided to stick around and listen, thank you. I guess the only other way to close this out is to say, thanks for setting me on this path. I would not have gotten this far without each and every one of you. There's still plenty more Digimon to talk about, and I've got other plans I've been meaning to get to as well, but in the meantime, remember that my top tier patrons get to see these videos 2 days early. You can find me on Blue Sky, Twitch, Discord, whichever you prefer, links in the description, and of course, as always, spread the word, tell your friends, and until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching. See you next mission. Well, I have joked before about working on big videos and essentially just editing together a feature-length film, but I mean, here we are. It's longer than Sonic 3. This thing was massive. And what a huge project, what a long road it was to get to this one, the last of the PS1 RPGs. There's still plenty of other Digimon games left to cover, and there are other big ones too, but this felt like the last monolith, I guess. And at first I was sad that I wasn't getting it out there, in time for the end of the year. But then I thought to myself, maybe it's okay just admitting that the last year just kind of sucked, and maybe it would be better to just go ahead and, kind of cut my losses and just start this year off in a great way with a huge video that I know a lot of people have been waiting for, and not rushing myself and making sure that it is actually as good as I can possibly get it. And I think that I'm a lot happier with this video now than I would have been otherwise, and I'm hoping you all feel the same. Of course, I owe a ton of gratitude to everybody watching, to everybody who's waited, and a huge, very special shout out to my current top tier patrons. This month they are Brendan Hess, Dresselite, Earl Valco, Jazzy Jefferson, Jeremiah Harrison, Kernium, Mackenzel, Mr. SP, Mitch Pym, Patricia Marcoux, Cinderin7, Snapkick, Surus the Skeptic, and Thomas Brooks. Thank you all so much for all of your support. Thank you for making this possible, because you do make it possible and you make it worth it. And I guess with that said, we know what the next thing on the docket is, don't we? And thankfully, it's not going to be quite as taxing as this one, but I hope to see you there when it is ready. See you next mission.